All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Stephen Neff. I'm the National Sales Manager for Venus Optics here in the United States. Here with the Laowa Meeting Masters series with Felix Hernandez of Dreamphography. Um, really interesting work, toy and model photography, some really cool composites and work. So I'm excited to hear more about what he has to say and some of his techniques and tips that we can gain from him. So we're going to ask Felix, we're going to say a quick hello and ask you to give us a quick introduction of yourself, where you're from, and how you got into photography, how you got started.
Well, thanks for all. Thank you, Stephen, for having me, and also to Laowa for this chat, and of course to all the people that are just now following this conversation. So thank you so much. And I have been doing photography for, let's say, professional photography for over 15 years, commercial photography. And I'm a graphic designer, so I just started like doing graphic design, working for different like small local creative agencies, and things went evolving. I ended up like launching my own creative firm. At that instance, I didn't do photography. Like we hired other photographers when we need them. But I mean, because we are living like I'm in Cancun, Mexico. It's like a really well-known place for, the touristic, it's a touristic zone, but it's not like a very big creative hub. So when we had like some commissioned works that we needed to maybe use photography for, an advertising or something, I struggled a little bit because we didn't have like commercial photographers in Cancun, or there were a few, and bringing someone from outside, it was really expensive because we were working for a small brand. So I decided that I will start doing like photography. This was now in the digital era. And of course, in the university, while I studied the graphic design career, I had some photography assignments. But back then, in the era where everything was analog, the dark room, medium and large format cameras in the studio and all that stuff. So in some way, I started doing photography again, now professionally, without being a professional of photography, but in the digital era. So I mean, it was the basic knowledge I had it, but it was just a thing of, relearning photography and studio photography in a digital era. So I have been doing that for almost 15, 17 years. And I mean, I have always liked to experiment, not only what the clients commission, no? I think that the personal work is really, really important to, communicate your own stuff, your own voice, your own vision. And that's how I, let's say, found these toys or scale models and working them in a studio and making on-camera effects and all this stuff. And mix it with what I already knew about digital manipulation, digital art. So, but that's kind of recent. I mean,
So
6 years.
yeah,
Something.
so the fact that you say you're studied as a graphic designer, that makes a lot of sense to me, just looking at your work. And you talk about the visualization of it. Yeah, seeing your work and seeing the stuff that you're putting together, it's definitely, personally, I am much more of a technical photographer, and not the artistic. I don't have the eye. And looking at your work, and as I've been looking at the stuff you've done, you're definitely coming at it from much more of an artistic lens. And so, did I understand? So you went from the graphic design into more of the video side. You were making video productions and hiring out the photography, and then adapted in your own, or was it sort of they both came together?
Yeah, well, I started as a graphic designer, more like doing branding stuff. But then I jumped in other small local agencies doing graphic design, but more for advertising. So there you start working with ideas and concepts, not only, let's say, the graphic part, but as well working with concepts and ideas. So I went more for the advertising side, and then I jumped into photography. So some way it's like mixing these three disciplines, and then I added some more, the model scaling, the crafts, and also the digital art. I don't do a lot of videos. The videos you have seen mostly are for my personal projects, but now more often clients and brands are asking for not just the still images, but also maybe an animated version, and also the video of the BTS, how it was done.
Well, and that certainly lends itself, right? The behind the scenes, to as far as what you're doing, that very much lends itself to the video side of things, right? You are doing the behind the scenes, the work that you're doing, and the little bits and pieces. Very, very impressive. So I want to, on your website, I want to touch really quick. Um, so this is your process page that you have, and it's very interesting for me to look through, where you're talking about and going through setting up these composites. And so the model making side of things, my guess would have been that you had started from a model making standpoint, and added the photography. So yeah, that's, I guess, my photography background. Uh, the model making is the stuff that really impresses me, and the being able to think and see in that smaller scale. Um, I I love it. It's been really, really cool to look at your work and sort of see where you're starting with a base image, and then building the different elements. So one, you're starting with the model car there, and then you're doing the model making to weather it and get some yeah, make it look not like a toy, but make it have some realistic look to it. Um, and then yeah.
Again, was just like experimenting, doing stuff in the studio. And I mean, I had not a lot of time because I was working in my creative agency. And I mean, I had to do something like, to practice, experiment, that was really quick and handy and low budget. So yeah, one day I just grabbed some toys of my kids, and like started experimenting with that. And for I have always like loved scale models and toys, and telling stories, and all the stuff. I knew how Star Wars was made. It has always fascinated me. The original trilogy, a lot of the scenes we see are done with scale models and in sets and doing practical effects. So I thought, well, it will be cool to try this. But I started just working. You go to a store, you buy a good model, and I started taking the photographs, and making like a really simple landscape using just common things, flour, or maybe some powders, stuff like that. Very, very simple. But I mean, I really quickly like fall in love with this kind of photography, and I decided to take it to the next step. And I have always loved to build stuff, and so it was kind of natural for me. I'm far away from being a professional or a good scale modeler or scale terrain artist, but I mean, it's just about practice and everyday learning new techniques. And now, I mean, I spend more time building these models and setups and landscapes, that making actually the photo. A production can take maybe 1 week or 1 month, the pre-production of building these scenes, and making the photos, it's maybe 2 or 3 days.
Yes. Well, so if we go back and continue through, so all right, so you've got the model here of the car, and you're setting the scene, and then it starts to become building the composite, right? Is You've got the model, but then you're taking elements and combining them. And I love seeing all of the little pieces. I love, like, yeah, just where you're breaking down where everything comes from. And actually, so question about stock images and where you, like, in your composites, do you have it, like, are you using stock images? And how often are you using stock versus going back into your own catalog of photography for backgrounds or for some of those smaller elements?
Not like a simple single path, or there are no rules. I mean, sometimes it's a combination of what I shoot in the studio and using digital manipulation, using stock photography. Some other times it's taking these dioramas, these little scenes, into location. So actually, the background you're seeing is real. So it's also kind of mix of landscape photography with the studio photography and all the stuff. Even I have used 3D renders, just like let's say matte painting for the background. Or sometimes I have an image, maybe a landscape photo I took. I have my catalog, and I just print it in like big canvas, and I use them. I hang them in the studio, and I use it as a background. So it depends what I'm trying to achieve. If I'm going to make video, I don't use green screen. So it depends on the assignment and also in my mood. I'm always trying like different stuff. So yes, I use a stock image when I don't have what I need. But I also use a lot of brushes. I'm working in two softwares. One is Affinity, and the other one is Photoshop. They are kind of the same, but I do different stuff in each one. And I paint a lot with digital brushes, the backgrounds, clouds or trees or skies or whatever. And other times I have a chance to travel. For example, there's a project I did with Audi, and for one of the images, they didn't want to use stock photography, so I had to go to Dubai just to make some landscape photography, then adding it in post-production. So yes, I mean, no rules, it depends.
Awesome. All right, so if we, I'm going to jump back out, and I want to come back to some of that production, but backing up to equipment and gear and sort of where you started and how you've built and sort of the concept that you started with. So you started as a graphic design, and then built more. What was your first camera?
It was a Canon Rebel XT, or that's the name how we know it here in Mexico. I think it was one of the, let's say, first commercial digital cameras from Canon DSLR.
Yep.
And I mean, I started with that because that was my budget, and also that was the only model I found in Cancun, and that's the reason I work with Canon. I keep working with Canon. I feel familiar with that brand, but nowadays, mostly any camera brand can do the same thing. You have like different levels of cameras, and yeah, I'm working with Canon.
So then the question is, what are you working with now? What's your primary camera at this point?
Right now, I'm still working with a DSLR. It's the Canon 5D Mark IV, and
Yep.
since I think the next model is not going to go out, I'm jumping now to the mirrorless. Okay, it could be
Yep.
I think the Canon R5. That for the kind of work that I do, it's perfect. So that thing of overheating and all that stuff, it doesn't matter to me, because if I made videos, just maybe 5 seconds, and I stop and rearrange everything and go again. So yes, I think I'm going to get this year the R5, or I don't know, but
Yeah, so certainly going from the 5D Mark IV, the R5 is the next step. But yeah, and for video, if you're just doing short clips or even medium clips, I don't think it's much of an issue. But again, Cancun, you say, can certainly get pretty warm, so that may be an issue. But I don't think you'd have much issue.
Yeah,
I've played with the R5 and R6 quite a bit, and they're
but
pretty sweet.
most of the time I'm indoors. You know, I'm in the studio. Let's say 95% I'm in the studio, and when I'm making landscape photography, usually it's not in Cancun. Maybe Denmark, Iceland, China. Well, Dubai is hot, so that would have been a problem with the R5. But I mean, they are just like when making video, just small clips.
So some of the elements that you're using, or equipment, I'm like, so the what's foreign to me is the model making side of things, and I'm curious, are there any like model making tools that you find particularly helpful in on the photography side of things? Are there any like clips or clamps, or are there any things that like aren't traditionally a photography or photographic or a video tool that you found particularly useful on the photography side?
On the photography side, for the kind of photography that I do, it's let's say it's kind of new thing now, but of course, just remember back in the days when we didn't have the CGI, all was done in camera, and a lot of commercial and movies again were done building these miniature setups. But the tools, I mean, it depends on your scene and how wide or how close you want your scene, and it also depends in the size of the model. That's really important. The thing is that the bigger the model, the more realistic is going to look, and that's because the depth of field. You know that if you get really close to a small object, you will lose depth of field. And how our brain is trained to perceive scale is that if you see all in focus, let's say that means that is like a real scene. But if you start losing really quickly that depth of field, our brain tells us that that's a small object. So it's really important, the size of the scene, the size of the model, and depending on that is the lens you are going to choose. And also the side camera, because let's say greater depth of field you are going to achieve. So in fact, if I took all my images with just the camera lens of the smartphone, you will have greater depth of field than using like a medium format camera. So a lot of people ask, hey, what's the camera you are using? I mean, for this kind of photography, you can use any kind of camera, even the crop sensor cameras or even a smartphone can do the job. Of course, yeah, for commercial, assignments, you cannot shoot with this one because you don't have like the same flexibility and resolution that a professional camera will give you.
I'm going to keep going on the equipment side while I'm trying to adjust here. For video and motion control, so you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, for video, I want to maybe make some shots that are not so static, so I want to add movement. But I bought the as a motorized slider because I was using, in fact, one of your lenses, the Laowa probe lens. I have it here. Maybe not everyone knows about this lens, but it's like a really funny looking lens. And this is a great lens because it allows you to go deep into, like, small places and get really close to them. And also it's a wide angle lens, so you have a lot of angle, no, of view, and it also gives you great depth of field. It starts in 14 and goes to 40. That's crazy. You need tons of light, but I mean, it's a like a really unique lens. But the thing is that because it's a macro, kind of heavy, if you want to achieve some movement, like by hand in a slider, it will shake, and just the minimum like shake, it will notice in your video. So for this one, I bought a slider that I can control with an app.
Into the probe because yeah, the 24 millimeter probe lens, it's a lens that loves movement, right? It's so for video work, that perspective, that parallax, it loves when you sort of like when you're able to shift and move along things at scale. So yeah, having some motion control and having the slider definitely changes what that lens can do. And there's certainly for photo, there are plenty of things that lens can do that there's just nothing else out there that can do it. And I'm whenever I'm talking about the probe lens, I'm always adamant to say it is not an easy lens to use. It is not forgiving, but when you do get something that hits, it there's
I mean, I'm still learning. Every time I use it, I learn like different things or try different things because, as you said, it's not an easy lens to use, but it's also very creative when you kind of manage or understand how it works. I got this was the cine version, so this is meant to be more for video. It don't have f stops; it has t stops. And I know there's a like a photography lens with f-stops, right? Another version of this one, but I just got it thinking more in video to really get close and do these movements. So I got this one, and I mean it's pretty fun to work with it. It gives you a unique point of view that no other lens can give you.
also the uh, you've recently started, and we talked a little before, but you've recently started using the Laowa 100 millimeter macro.
It's 2x factor of magnification. I love the lens. I have it just, let's say, recently. I think for over maybe 6, 7 months. I haven't had the chance to work a lot with making photography with that lens because most of the scenes I'm doing right now, it's are more for in the wide angle aspect ratio. So I'm using wide angle lenses, but I'm using a lot of this lens again for video. So for string close-ups or close-ups, and it's really sharp. And yes, I mean I'm loving using it, but most for video. And just to say, the Laowa Cine version lens, the 24 probe lens, I have used it as well for photography. It's not my main use, but I have done some pretty cool photos with it, and it also works great.
That you are using at this point for most of your work. You said it was the Canon 24 millimeter tilt shift.
And I had to do a lot of research to find just the right lens for the kind of photography I wanted to do, because there's not like a dedicated, lens for, making this kind of photography. So I was looking for a lens that allowed me to get close to the scenes, relatively close. In centimeters could be between 30 to 20 centimeters close to the scene, but as well it has to be a wide angle lens to have some of the models all in frame, because again, these models sometimes are not so small. I have like I normally work, if I'm using cars, they are 1/18 of a scale, so they are not so small. I have one here just to, you can have a sense of the size of the models. So it had to be that you can get close to the scene, that wide angle enough to have it all in the frame, and also the shift and tilt factor. You know, when you get close to something with a wide angle lens, it tends to deform. So you can correct here that distortion, and as well with the tilt, you can achieve even greater depth of field. So even sometimes shooting at f/18 or f/22 or whatever, because you are so close to the subject, you don't have that great depth of field to sell the idea that it's a real size model. So that lens like gather all the stuff that I was looking for making this kind of photography. So it depends again, because some of the shots I have done it with the 100 millimeter, but mostly I'm using wide angle lens, the 24 tilt and shift. That's right.
So yeah, so again, I'm setting myself up here, and the next lens that I'm gonna see if we can get a sample out to you, because I want to see what you can do with it. Is one of our newer lenses is the Laowa 15 millimeter shift lens, and so so it's going even wider, full frame coverage on your 5D Mark III, or excuse me, 5D Mark IV. But you have the ability to shift. So it's the widest angle shift lens available. And so looking at your work and looking at what you've done, I'm really curious to see what you could do with something like this. And also even I've done some playing around with shifting with video. And so what the Laowa, the mechanism that it has to allow you to shift, allows you to shift very smoothly with the ring on the lens, right? So you can see as I twist, I can get my shift, and then I can also twist the mount as well, so that I can get a vertical shift, a horizontal shift, or an angular shift in any position. So
borrow me that lens, that will be great, because sometimes I mean, I'm working with the 24, but for some scenes I need a little more of that wide angle, and I think having a 15, it's 15, right? 15 millimeters, that could come very, very handy. And I also love to do, I mean, landscape photography, again, from my background. So having those kinds of lenses are very, very handy. I have a trip in November to Iceland, so maybe I can.
with something like that lens. Um, so I'm gonna jump back a little bit and talk about depth of field. Do you do any focus stacking in your work?
And sometimes even working at the highest f-stop, f20, f22, and even doing the tilt function in the lens, you don't get the depth of field, the enough depth of field. And again, that depends on the size of the model and the size of the scene. So yeah, sometimes I do focus stacking, not so much, because when you do focus stacking, all the images have to be, you know, the same. You cannot move anything. So for most of my images, I do on-camera effects, adding smoke or fog or fire or whatever, and that changed. I cannot have that effect in all of the yes, in all of the images for the focus stacking. So I use it, but not very often. In fact, in one of the shots, it's a Coke cap and a cigarette butt that I sent you that I took with the probe lens. I was like at f18, but I also did focus stacking for those images to achieve greater depth of field.
Shot with the probe, I think, right? That was with the 24 millimeter probe. Yeah. Yep, I remember seeing that image.
Yes, again, I normally just use a regular lens. It could be between 24 to 100 millimeters. So I don't get so close. I normally don't use macro. If I use a macro like the 100 or the 24 millimeters, is in a special, assignments that I have or personal projects. But most of the time, it's just done with a regular lens. They are the models, the scenes are not so small. And yeah, but I mean, it depends. I last year I started a series like working with really really small models. They are like train HO scale. It's called kind of a conceptual thing, a little bit different from what I normally do. And for that, I used macro lens, the 100 millimeters, as well the 24 Laowa. But they are so small that I also wanted some compression. So for that, the 100 millimeters macro from Laowa, it's great.
I'm gonna keep touching on equipment for a little bit, but we are gonna get to the art because that's definitely clearly a big side of your work. Um, Smoke, you smoke and fire. What's your uh, go-to smoke tool? Hey, there. Okay.
That Yeah, I have to be honest. I smoke, and I started like some of my first project. I needed smoke, and you know, I had it here. But when you are doing a scene and you have to smoke like 3 cigarettes in a row, I mean, that's not good. It's worse, and it's not practical. Okay, so then I started experimenting with vapes, but it was kind of the same thing. And I found like a little machine that it's called the micro fogger. It looks like a vape, but it's designed for production, photo and video production, and it's really really small. And it works with glycerin, so no problem there. And I work with that when I have to do like small scenes with smoke. When I have to do larger scenes, I normally use a smoke machine, but it has to be a low fog machine. So that fog has to chill down, to cool down, so it stays in the ground. Depends what kind of effect you want to do. If I want to do some clouds, then I use the just a regular fog machine, and I also work a lot with dry ice. Just it's just dry ice, and that gives you a lot of really really dense fog smoke, and it also stays low. Uh, the atmosphere. I have never tried that because getting it in Cancun is really really hard, and I cannot even order because it's in a compressed bottle, so they will not send it to Cancun. So I have not worked with that one. Microfogger. I don't have like but if you search like microfogger, I think the brand is Consig, something Consig. I don't know. Microfogger, there's just like one. Yeah.
Lighting lightning round. So lighting clearly is a big part or a big component of your work, and so all different kinds of lights. So I've got a couple questions that I'm sort of a quick answer on. So we're going to start with, what's your favorite strobe light?
Are you talking about a brand? I mean, I use it. I'm using Bowens that I think no longer exists, and also Einstein lights when I have to freeze action. Okay, and now that's the thing that I have like recently, last 2 years, to start using more constant light than flashes, and I'm working with Godox. I have like really different kind of lights from Godox, and I mean it has been great because again for most of my scenes there's nothing moving, so working with constant light gives me the I can see just live how the light is affecting the scene. So I think it's a great advantage. Everything is LED, and because as well for video, and these are LEDs done for video and photography, because you don't have flickering. If you and I'm sometimes like shooting at 16 or 120 frames per second, so using other kind of constant light will give you like that flickering or vibration in the image. Well, the my favorite is its umbrella. I think is 7 foot. How do you say 7 foot? The size to size when the umbrella is open, and it has also like a diffuser, so it's kind of a umbrella soft box and gives you a really like soft light. So I use it that mostly when I want to represent like cloudy day, overcast sky, because it gives you that really soft light. But I use all kind of modifiers from beauty dishes, soft boxes, umbrellas, harsh light. Just working with I have like really, let's say, special lights that are called focusing light. So the light has a lens, and you can project like tiny figures or just put the light in a very small spot, because it works focusing the light. And I also work with RGB like lights, just to maybe if I want to make a blue sky, I just put these RGBs back in the scene, and I can turn. I have a big wall, white wall. I turn it all blue, any kind of blue, or maybe it's a sunset. Then I turn it to an orangey tone, and yeah, a lot of flexibility using LED lights and modifiers.
And so, yeah, so big light modifiers and small light modifiers. And then, so the last question I'm going to say is, what's if you had one, like a number one lighting rule that you follow, or a lighting tip that you could share with us, what would that be?
Well, I try that it looks, for most of the scenes, I try that it looks that it's all only one source light, because most of the scenes I'm trying to represent are outdoors. So of course outdoors you have just, let's say, a main lighting source that will be the sun or the moon. And of course, maybe you have some artificial light coming from, maybe some street lights or something like that, or the headlights of a car or something like that. But I try to keep it simple, but keeping it simple is not so simple in a studio. So I don't know if that's a tip. The tip will be like just try to experiment. I mean, some of the shots I just use, let's say two lights, one for the scene and the other one for the background. If I'm adding like a digital background, I have to kind of evenly lit the background. So two lights is more than enough. But others get really, really complex, and I cannot show you, but I have a scene here that I have like, oh my, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lights.
So
specific positions.
So yeah, so the and what I heard is that they, like, especially with the composite work, trying to keep consistent light sources, right? Knowing, and that's going to be tough, knowing ahead of time where the elements are going to go, and that's going to lead me in nicely into the next sort of concept I want to talk about, which is sort of the pre-visualization. So yeah, as you're lighting, you're trying to stay consistent with what it's going to look like. So how detailed do you get into a pre-visualization of a composite work? Or do you have a sketch in your head? Do you draw it out? Do you know all the different elements so that as you're photographing the elements that you need, you know where the lights, like, so yeah, we say that, all right, if there's a street light and there's a bunch of different elements, you're lighting each element with the same concept of where it's going to go. Is that's sort of how you're working?
Yeah, I mean, I normally don't do sketches, certainly not for the personal projects. As you said, I have like the sketch and the idea in my mind, and that's my guide. For commercial project, in most of the cases, they ask me for a sketch, but I mean, it's mostly like a rough sketch. I'm not showing them the mood or the color or where are the lights going. So for commercial projects and even for personal projects, I have the idea in mind or sketch it. I go into the studio, I build all the setup, I do the lighting. I take like 1 or 2 days just doing the lighting setup, and I shoot and I go into the computer and I see if it works. Okay, and if not, I normally go back and change the things a little bit. So I find myself like doing let's say one image 2 or 3 times, because it's part of seeing what is going to work for that scene and for those images for the final composites. Most of the images I do are not done, let's say, in one shot. Okay, you do it like in different passes, like they do it in the for a movie, and that's because the lighting. You have like a general lighting that shows a little bit of everything, but then you have like a very specific lights, like let's say the light that comes inside a house. Well, you expose just for that light, and all those different passes then are put together in post-production.
So yeah, all right. So lighting and pre-visualize. So the now you've got me thinking about a bunch of different things as far as how large a scale do you see yourself working? Are you focused on staying small, or could you see yourself going to a larger scale with the same concept of composites and building a scene, but going to a photographing and shooting at a life-size scale? Is that a direction you see yourself going to, or experimenting with maybe some personal projects? Or
So I mean, I started like doing real life size photography of whatever models, landscape products, cars, and all this stuff. And I mean, I like it, but what I found, I was lucky enough to find my niche, and that clients look for this kind of photography that I really, really enjoy. I mostly work alone. I don't want to scale, in people, or again, I had a creative agency and I went away from that world just to be like a lone wolf. I mean, it's part of my personality. I have worked for commercial products with other creatives when needed, but yeah, and the size of the scale scenes could be anything. Could be really something really small. Sometimes they are as big as this room, or if it comes a project where I have to rent like a bigger space to make a larger scene, that's okay with me. While it's a a scale scene, I'm okay with that.
I've got a question from the chat here. I, so this is from Scott Zempel. Your work is amazing at storytelling. Can you tell us about your process of the telling a story through a single image?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of, let's say, sources of inspiration, but yes, I can go back even to my childhood because I was kind of a geek or nerd kid that was always in his room playing with his toys, and I was like, by playing, creating my own worlds or stories. So I have always loved that. Then the background that I have as a graphic designer, and then working in the advertising industry, creating concepts and stories for different brands, and of course, you start thinking in your own. And I find a lot of inspiration as well in my dreams. That's why this I have this strange name called Dreamphography that basically states that I'm portraying what I see in my dreams. So I use the dreams as a source of inspiration. That doesn't mean that what I dream I do it. It's just uh, in the dreams you have this kind of dreamy images that are really personal, and I take some of those images that I see in the dreams to as a base to create my images, and also for commercial work. I kind of how do you say, to before I go to sleep, to program my brain if I want to dream in some theme specifically. Okay, that's like a little bit of training, but let's say I want to make an image of war and peace. So of course I do a lot of research. I see movies or read a book or music that has to be with that theme. So I saturate my brain, and when I go to sleep, those images come to life. It's just like if you are seeing Netflix and you are just going to see one chapter and you end up seeing all the season in one night. When you go to sleep, you are going to dream about what you saw in that TV show. So it's kind of the little same, let's say, formula to come up with these images in the dreams.
I yeah, I love that concept of sort of priming yourself and thinking, but like actually, like of course we do it, and I'm thinking you've got me thinking about when I get far too into a video game. It hasn't happened in a few years, but I will start dreaming in the video game, and so but like thinking about it much more of an intentional practice. That's a really interesting concept of like trying to feed yourself from all different areas just so that it builds, but actually having that be part of the practice. Um,
The amazing thing is that you absorb all this inspiration and you take it into the dreams, but the come out of that, it also has a lot of you, because the dreams are in the subconscious. So there are your fears, your everything. It mix it up. It's like a blender, and the come out is like really personal. So I think, like, as let's say, as an artist, it's really important to put something or a lot of yourself in the art you are creating. So dreams are really great to pull that out.
awesome. That's you went right into, because one of the questions that I had is around dreamphography. and where it came from. So you beat me to asking the question even. Another question we got here. If you could photograph one type of subject for the rest of your career, what would it be?
Oh my, that's I, I don't know. I don't think I could do that because I'm always trying to change. I mean, I have done a lot of miniature car photography, but that was something because, you know, brands started like looking for that. So I went that way. But in fact, I'm not really a car or car guy. I like cars, but I mean, I'm not a fan. I do it mostly for, you know, commercial purpose and also personal projects. But I really don't have like a team. I also do a lot of shots of you know, with Star Wars models and figures and spaceships and all that stuff because I love Star Wars. uh, but I don't see myself just doing that. I get bored pretty fast, so I have to keep changing. So I don't know if I can answer that question. I'm pretty sure I will get bored really quickly. That's great. Do I discount as well? I think yes.
So, next question I've got. What is your yeah? So I'm going to start with what is your favorite part of of the production and the way that you work? What's your favorite thing about it? And then we're of course we're going to have to go on the back end and see what's your least favorite part. But I'm interested like what's your favorite part of how you work and the way your production goes.
Oof, well, it's a mix. Also, that one is a tough one question. Let's say it's a mix first of creating a concept, an idea that could be like one day or 1 month. You never know, but that's the first step. The second thing will be the craft. It's creating these scenes, gathering models, buying or building from scratch or 3D printing or whatever. The next one will be setting up, you know, those models in the studio, the lighting, design, choosing the right lens, the right angle, the distance, all the stuff. And the last part will be the post-production, taking all that to the software and giving shape to all the elements. So I think right now the part that I most enjoy is the craft. Okay, working with your hands, creating something from, you know, maybe paper or cardboard or whatever material you are using. Is I find it like fascinating being able to hold it, you know. I think that's a painting, you know, giving the rusty effect. I really enjoy the craft part, and it's where I spend more time. Okay, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy the other steps of my process. But I think that's my favorite one right now.
So then what is the least favorite part? If there is something that you'd had to say.
Uh, I think could be setting. I don't know. I like everything, but I think setting the light, and I think it's not that I don't like it, the lighting design, but I think I stroll a lot, or you know, I set the lights in one way and I like it, but I change something, I like it even more. So it's kind of, you know, for me difficult to decide how I'm going to light the scene. It gives me a little bit more of conflict, internal conflict, but I mean, I enjoy it as well. It's part of the process.
So we've got another question in the chat from Luc Gayot uh, about specifically about your work with the 24 millimeter probe lens. Do you use the built-in light at all onto the front element of that probe?
Honestly, I think that light is really, really handy if you are like going into a small place and you're not able to put like an external light. And I think it will be handy for that. And it's a great feature, but I mean, it's a small light, it's a harsh light, it goes like it's in front of the element. So normally you try to light up to get a little bit of volume. So you try to put the lights in the side or in the back to give a sense of also depth and all this stuff. So I haven't used it, but I mean, it's there, and maybe one day I will do it.
Yeah, the certainly if you were getting closer, the light on the probe, right? If you were doing that ultra macro side, going into that 1-to-1 and beyond, yeah, that's where the built-in ring light makes a lot of sense. But for what you're doing, where you're looking for the lighting design, and as you just said, like you're spending days tweaking the light and getting it just right to create what the effect you're looking for. So for that type of work, I don't think it makes sense for you to use the built-in light on the probe. Um,
It in a studio, but I'm pretty sure if I was in like in the field, and I have to go really close to some subject or going inside a small hole, something like that. Yeah, it's good to know it's there.
my last question that I've got before we go is: are there any photographers that inspire you? And that I say photographers, but certainly model makers and other designers in the work that you do. Are there any people specifically that you can point to as your inspirations?
Yes, I mean there are so many in each of the fields in the model making, crafts, in photographers, and most of them they don't even do the kind of photography that I do. I mean it's for example, there's a really well known photographer called Bong Wong. I like his kind of work. I like his proposal. He's all into environment. I like the images he created using just plastic bottles and garbage and all this stuff. There's another good friend called Adrian Sommeling. He's a great photographer, but also a great digital artist doing really, really cool stuff. And I love his work. And Eric Johansson, that's another really well-known photographer for his photography and manipulation digital art skills. So there are plenty, and but I follow as well a lot of let's say conceptual illustrators. Okay, concept illustrators. They mostly work for the movie industry, gaming industry. And what I love about them is the scenes they can create, they can envision, and they have no limits. Whatever they imagine, they can draw it, and this huge landscape with mountains and all this stuff. And there I follow some of them. I not know a lot of them, so yes, there's inspiration everywhere. I follow a lot of artists, different kind of artists.
Awesome. That, so yeah, we've got. I'm gonna check and see if we've got any more questions. I think that's it. And Felix, I wanted to say thank you so much for the conversation. You've definitely got me inspired to. I've got a 4.5-year-old daughter who's got a bunch of fun toys, so you've got me inspired to pull out some of those toys and see what sort of images I can make. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us and our Meeting the Master series here with Venus Optics and Laowa lenses. So it's a real pleasure to speak.
No, thank you guys for having me. I really enjoy it. Hopefully, some of the things that what I said makes sense because my English, but I have really enjoyed this talk, and thank you.
It's been great. Have a great one.
For all the people that are watching. See you.